If we want future generations to thrive, we have to reach across that void and remember that one of our greatest human strengths is our capacity for honest conversations. So, can we talk? Yeah, we can. We can have rich and rewarding conversations about the very hardest things: climate, genocide, pandemics, gender, mental health, personal conflict. Conversations that leave us feeling heard and understood and drive collaborative action aligned with that shared understanding. We can because we always have. Humans have been talking since the very beginning of humans. Through hand gestures, grunts, groans, laughter, song, art, symbols with shared meaning that eventually found their way onto pages and screens that allow us to communicate across the greatest divides the whole way around the world. We talk in ways that no other species ever has. Despite Neanderthals having potentially larger brains than us, they never invested in art, ritual, in symbol in the same way Homo sapiens always have. And 40,000 years ago, when ice crept up upon the land and food got really scarce, the species that survived was not the ones with the bigger brains. The species that survived had more ways of communicating, tapping into each other's ideas, collaboratively problem solving and passing down innovations to future generations like no other species ever has. We can talk. The species that survived had ways of keeping kinship groups together through flood, famine, fire, war, grief, heartbreak, and loss time and time and time and time again. Yeah, we can talk. It's our thing. It's what we do. It's who we are. But sometimes, recently, it doesn't really feel like that. When we see people ranting over the top of others and completely ignoring their lived experience and perspectives, when we see people speaking with maliciousness, belligerence that seems so deliberate, and if we're honest, we've all had times where we have forgotten that unique human superpower. And maybe we blocked, avoided, cancelled or ghosted. Maybe we mocked their stupidity or ridiculed their ignorance. Or maybe we got into a slinging match of my alternative facts versus your fake news. But facts don't change minds. And ignoring someone doesn't help them to understand. And calling people names, well, that never convinced anyone to switch on to my team. It just drives a deepening chasm of division. And we are increasingly a disconnected society. The political divide feels greater than it ever has, and it is tearing families apart. Young people are increasingly divided on gender lines, with young men being drawn to the right and young women standing in increasing numbers on the opposite side. In workplaces, people tell me about a generation gap that feels awkward, messy, so difficult to bridge. And individuals, we're lonely. 15% of us now have no close friends. 15%. That is an extraordinary shift in the last 30 years. A shift that the World Health Organization now places as one of our greatest global public health issues. And they're not just talking about our mental health. Loneliness is as dangerous to our physical heart as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Social isolation impacts our longevity to the same degree as hypertension and obesity. Because when our species was new, back on the African savannah, if we were separated from our people, we're in trouble. We don't survive well by ourselves, so our bodies develop strong neurological warning systems to remind us that separation, isolation, disconnection is dangerous. A physiological reaction that dampens our immune system and raises cortisol. And back in the day, impulsiveness might have been a useful thing. But in Jeffrey Cohen's book, Belonging, he talks about his team's research from Stanford University that found that same physiological reaction changes how we communicate. He writes that when our sense of belonging is threatened, even momentarily, we feel worse about ourselves, we perform below our potential, we behave impulsively, and we're more likely to see others as hostile and react with defensiveness. It changes how we communicate. That might have been useful back in the day. That impulsiveness might have driven us to move, walk, run, swim the extra mile to reconnect with our people. But now, we're experiencing that reaction at home or at work with powerful communication devices in our hands that enable us to immediately offload that impulsiveness, that defensiveness onto the world instead of moving it through our bodies. And on the other end of that connection, our friends, followers, connections, well, if they're a bit disconnected, they're potentially seeing our communication as more hostile than we intended it. And so we're stuck in a loop of disconnection and hostility and mistrust and division until one of us walks away. And then we're really disconnected. I think this is affecting all of us. I know that physiological reaction, that reaction to, hey, how could they say that? How could they believe that? Why would they not respond? And sometimes I'll go for a walk and find my people. And other times I respond with what feels like sophistication, but might easily be received as hostility. And sometimes I give up, I turn around, and I walk away. And I'm going to bet that you have too. But that's not who we are. We are built for belonging. We are hardwired for connection, communication, and collaboration. We evolved in, survived because of community. Historically, for the vast majority of human history, we've lived in small communities of 50 to 150 people. And in a community like that, you can't just block someone out of your life. In those communities, if we didn't find ways to mend, to heal, to proactively connect, we didn't survive. And it's tempting to think of previous generations or our ancestors of having something magical that we don't. But humans throughout history, around every corner of this globe, have invested in social structures and institutions and rules of engagement. Cultural, spiritual, economic rituals and traditions that form and the structures we've been investing in so heavily recently seem not to be bringing us together. So I've been searching for alternative digital social structures with human connection and belonging at their heart, and I'm not finding what I'm looking for. So I hope there's clever people out there inventing new digital social structures, structures that move us towards each other instead of rewarding hostility, hijacking our need for connection with that immediate chance to compare ourselves and to vent. And I hope our governments are funding healthier digital structures, because if we're to bridge this divide, we need much, much, much better ways of connecting at scale. But while we're all waiting for the big issue to be resolved by some kind of magic wand. We can all take action on a smaller scale. We can all start conversations that bring our families, communities, and workplaces together. If we remember that it's not just about magic or courage, that people have always had a structure, a system, and a method. So I want to share with you a simple structure, which is part of a broader framework for better conversations that I've been collecting and collating over 20 years of difficult conversations with all kinds of different people. It's not a set of skills just for you to use by yourself, but a structure for you to practice with your loved ones, with your family, with your co-workers, with your people, your crew, your team. And it's just 4 steps. Step 1 is to practice carving out time and space for each other. Instead of reacting to, hey, how could they say that, or where have they gone? Take a breath and just consider, am I in the right headspace for this conversation? Are they in the right headspace for this conversation? Do we need to carve out time in the calendar, sit down on the weekend with a beverage or a meal, or even go for a walk? Sometimes my intention to take a breath and to be really present, and the invitation for us to talk, is enough to radically shift the dynamic. Step 1 is to carve out the time and space. Step 2 is to lead with clear, safe honesty. If we want to move from an argument on stats and data and knowledge and information to a shared understanding, well, someone has to lead us from here to here by sharing our experiences, our stories, our feelings, sharing why that data is so important. Yeah, it takes vulnerability, but it's infinitely more engaging than just the data, just the facts. And that same vulnerability can make other people feel safe. If we're trying to start a conversation with someone who's shut down, turned away, or is really struggling, that's a hard conversation for them. We can show them, we can remind them of our ability to talk through our courageous honesty, if we do it safely. I'm not talking about dumping our emotions onto someone else, making our problems theirs, or sharing inappropriate things. I'm talking about sharing what is real for me in a way that strengthens their understanding. Is this just going to upset them? Is this just going to shock them? Or is this going to help them to understand where I'm at and where they are at and what I'm worried about and what's possible? We don't just need more vulnerability. We need clear, safe honesty. And yeah, you can do this at work. If you want a workplace where people know each other, trust each other, support each other, hold each other to account, collaborate when things get tough, you can be a leader with professional honesty and say, this is a place we can have real conversations. Carve out the space, lead with safe honesty. Step 3 is to listen with a genuine sense of curiosity, to get comfortable with not having the answers, to get comfortable with disagreement, to get comfortable with silence, and ask something you are genuinely curious about. Instead of listening to fix or listening to win, listen to learn something new from someone you disagree with. Or listen to make someone feel heard. Because when they feel heard, they're more likely to want to hear from every other person in the room. Sometimes our natural reaction to tough conversations is to manage, to delegate, to problem solve, to fix, to dismiss, to avoid. But when we carve out the time and space, lead with honesty and listen with curiosity, we might reach some kind of shared understanding in that mysterious void in between us. And then we can move to step 4, which is action and accountability. We need curiosity in honesty so that that nebulous void of mystery becomes the shape of shared understanding. But what's the point unless we ground that in action and accountability? And you can't force anyone to take action. but you can commit yourself. You can say, hey, now that we understand each other better, I think I can do something differently. What can you do now that you understand me better? And we can invite accountability. If it looks like I've forgotten this conversation, I want you to remind me. This is what I want you to say to me. This is what I want you to do for me. How can I remind you? 4 simple steps. Carve out the space. Lead with honesty. Listen with curiosity, and ground the conversation in action and accountability. I've used these steps as part of a bigger program with corporate groups, with groups of students, groups of young people, groups of parents, groups of teachers, groups of men who want to see change in our culture of masculinity. And humans aren't simple creatures. It's never perfect. It's never easy. But when we do it together, we can remind each other that we can build the capacity for difficult conversations together. So if any of those 4 steps resonate with you, yeah, do them by yourself, but also share them with your partner. Share them with your besties, your parents, your children, your work colleagues, your team, your next door neighbour, because the world is in need of collaborative leaders. Not just for me to carve out a conversation with you or with us, but for me to carve out a conversation between people who are struggling to connect. Peer to peer, sibling to sibling, child to child, leader to leader. Because the world is on fire in so many ways. And the solutions to the increasingly complex problems that we are facing will only come when we tap into the rich diversity of human experiences. Not just the diversity of people we agree with. If we want future generations to thrive, we have to reach across that void and remember that one of our greatest human strengths is our capacity for honest conversations, our capacity to carve out the time and space, to be honest, to be curious, and to anchor our conversations in action. If we can support each other to build those capacities together, we might just remember that we have always done the very hardest things together. Thank you.